Picture this extraordinary moment. Right now, as you listen to these words, our planet Earth is locked in an ice age, not heading toward one, not recovering from one. We're living in one right this very moment. This might surprise you, but it's absolutely true. For the past 2.5 million years, Earth has been caught in a magnificent cosmic rhythm, a pulse that beats once every 100,000 years. And this rhythm has shaped everything. The mountains, the oceans, the creatures that walk the land, and even us. Tonight, we're going to travel back through time together. Not with a time machine, but with something better. The stories written in ice, in stone, in bones buried deep beneath the ground. We're going to meet creatures so magnificent and strange that they seem like dreams. Giant sloths who dug tunnels the size of subway passages, woolly mammoths whose hair draped to the ground like royal cloaks, saber-toothed cats with teeth like curved daggers gleaming in the pale Ice Age sun. But this isn't just a story about the past. It's a story about patterns, about rhythms, about how our planet breathes in and out across vast stretches of time. Every 100,000 years, like a cosmic heartbeat, Earth transforms. Ice sheets grow, spreading across continents like frozen blankets. Then they melt away, retreating to the poles, and then, as sure as the tide, they return. For hundreds of thousands of years this pattern repeated, and life, beautiful, stubborn, creative life, adapted to this rhythm. Animals evolved to thrive in the cold. Others learned to wait out the frozen times and flourish during the warm periods in between. Human beings too are children of this rhythm. We evolved during these Ice Age cycles. Our ancestors hunted the great beasts we'll meet tonight. They painted pictures of them on cave walls by firelight. They carved tools from mammoth ivory and built shelters from giant bones. The Ice Age shaped human culture, human technology, human society itself. So tonight, before you drift into sleep, let's walk together through this ancient world. We'll explore frozen landscapes where the wind howled across endless plains. We'll meet the giants who ruled this frozen kingdom. We'll discover how Earth's slight wobble through space creates such dramatic changes, and we'll uncover the mystery of why, after thriving for hundreds of thousands of years, most of these magnificent creatures suddenly vanished. The story has drama, mystery, beauty, and yes, even controversy. Scientists still debate what killed the Ice Age giants. Was it climate change? Was it human hunting? Or was it something far more complex, a perfect storm of factors that even today we're still trying to understand? So settle in, get comfortable, let the rhythm of this story wash over you. Because we're about to journey back to a time when Earth was a very different place, yet somehow strangely familiar. A time when giants walked, when humans huddled around fires telling stories, when ice-covered lands that now hold cities and forests. Let's begin our journey at the peak of the last Ice Age, 20,000 years ago, when Earth's frozen transformation reached its most spectacular extreme. Chapter 2. When Giants Walked in Frozen Dreams. 20,000 years ago, if you could stand on a hillside in what would someday be called France, the view would steal your breath away. Stretching before you, endless grasslands ripple in the cold wind. Not like the grasslands we know today. This is something different, something that no longer exists anywhere on Earth. Scientists call it the Mammoth Steppe, and it was like a cold weather version of the African savanna. In the distance you see movement. A herd of massive shapes moves slowly across the plain. At first they look like boulders, but then you realize these are woolly mammoths. Imagine an elephant, but built for winter. Their bodies are covered in thick, shaggy fur that hangs down almost to the ground, with two layers, a warm, dense underlayer like the finest wool, and longer outer guard hairs that shed water and snow. Their ears are small, nothing like the great fanning ears of African elephants. Every part of their body is designed to hold precious heat. The largest mammoth in the herd, an old bull, stands nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder. His tusks curve outward and then inward, crossing over each other like giant ceremonial scythes. These tusks can grow longer than a grown human is tall, and he uses them to sweep snow aside, searching for the tough grasses hidden beneath. The herd moves with purpose and grace despite their size. Mothers walk with calves staying close, learning where to find food, how to use their trunks to break ice for drinking water. The matriarch, the oldest female, leads them. She's perhaps 60 years old, and in her long memory, she holds knowledge of where to find food during the harshest winters, which routes to take to avoid danger, where the good water sources lie. But mammoths aren't alone on this ancient plain. There, see that movement. A woolly rhinoceros emerges from a shallow ravine. Like the mammoth, it's built like a fortress against the cold. Thick fur covers its body, and its most striking feature is that massive front horn, longer than your arm. The rhino uses this horn as a snowplow, clearing away deep drifts to reach vegetation underneath. Scientists know this because they've found preserved woolly rhinos in frozen ground, with horn tips worn smooth from use, like a shovel blade worn down by hard work. As the sun begins its low arc across the southern sky, for we're far north, and winter sun never climbs high, other creatures emerge from the landscape. A herd of horses appears, but these aren't like modern horses. They're stockier, with thick winter coats and striped legs. And over there, a small group of steppe bison, their massive heads lowered as they graze. These bison are enormous, larger than their modern relatives, with horn spans wider than a person's outstretched arms. But if you want to see something truly remarkable, truly strange, look toward that grove of scattered trees in the distance. Something massive moves there, something that doesn't quite fit your expectations. It's a giant ground sloth, and calling it giant barely captures the reality. This creature stands as tall as an elephant when it rears up on its hind legs, which it's doing right now, reaching for vegetation high in the trees. Its arms are tremendously long and powerful, ending in enormous curved claws. Its face is somewhat bear-like, gentle despite the creature's intimidating size. This is Megatherium, and it's one of the strangest success stories of the Ice Age. While its distant cousins, the tree sloths we know today, are small and slow creatures living in tropical forests. The giant ground sloths adapted to life in cooler climates and grew to massive proportions. And here's something absolutely fascinating. Beneath the ground where that sloth is feeding, there might be a tunnel system, hand-dug by sloths just like this one. Scientists have discovered these burrows in South America, massive underground passages carved through solid earth by animals that weighed as much as elephants. Inside these tunnels, you can still see the claw marks on walls and ceilings, perfectly matching giant sloth skeletons. Why did they dig such enormous tunnels? Perhaps to escape temperature extremes, perhaps to hide from predators, perhaps as dens for raising their young in safety. We still don't know for certain, but imagine the effort. An elephant-sized creature excavating passages 40 meters long, 2 meters high, working in darkness with only its powerful claws and incredible strength. The Ice Age was full of such wonders, creatures that seem impossible, yet they thrived here for hundreds of thousands of years. Some of these animals existed in forms that sound like fantasy. The Irish elk, which wasn't actually an elk and didn't only live in Ireland, carried antlers spanning more than 3.5 meters, wider than a car. Imagine the strength required just to hold your head up with that much bone projecting from your skull. In South America, there walked creatures called glyptodons. Imagine armadillos grown to the size of cars, with shells made of hundreds of bony plates fused together. Some species had tails like medieval weapons, covered in spikes and rings of bone that they could swing with devastating force. Recent studies suggest these armored giants could actually rear up on their hind legs, making them even more formidable, and there were predators to match the prey. Somewhere in the lengthening shadows, a pair of eyes watches the mammoth herd. A saber-toothed cat lies in wait, its famous canine teeth, 18 centimeters of curved, flattened bone, visible even when its mouth is closed. These teeth aren't for crushing bone or gripping prey. They're surgical instruments designed for precision killing. The cat will use its powerful forearms to wrestle prey to the ground, then deliver one perfect bite to the throat or belly, severing major blood vessels. Death comes quickly. These are the giants of the Ice Age. But here's what's truly remarkable. They weren't rare or struggling. They were abundant. The mammoth steppe supported populations of large animals that probably matched or exceeded the density of large mammals in Africa today. The Ice Age world was full of life, just different life than what we see now. Before we drift deeper into this frozen world, take a moment to picture it clearly. Close your eyes and see it. The endless grasslands, the herds of massive creatures, the cold wind carrying snow across the plain. Hear the trumpeting of mammoths calling to each other. Smell the scent of crushed grass and ice. This was Earth's reality for tens of thousands of years, a world we'll never see again, except in our imagination and in the bones and stories left behind. But how did Earth become this frozen kingdom? What cosmic mechanism created these conditions? To understand that, we need to look not at Earth itself, but at Earth's journey through space. Chapter 3: The Cosmic Dance That Shapes Our World. Here's something wonderful to think about as you relax. Earth is dancing through space, not just orbiting the sun in a simple circle, but moving in a complex, beautiful pattern that changes over time. Earth wobbles, it tilts. The shape of its orbit stretches and contracts. And these tiny changes, these subtle variations in Earth's cosmic dance, have enormous effects on our planet's climate. A Serbian scientist named Milankovitch figured this out in the early 1900s, and his discovery was nothing short of brilliant. Imagine you're trying to solve a mystery. Ice ages come and go in a regular pattern, roughly every 100,000 years. What could cause such a precise rhythm? It must be something regular, something predictable, something like clockwork. And what in nature is more clockwork-like than the movements of planets through space? Milankovitch realized that Earth's relationship with the Sun changes in 3 main ways, each following its own cycle. First, there's the shape of Earth's orbit itself. Earth doesn't travel around the Sun in a perfect circle. It travels in an ellipse, an oval. But that oval's shape changes over time. Sometimes Earth's orbit is more circular. Sometimes it's more stretched out. This cycle takes about 100,000 years to complete. When Earth's orbit is more elliptical, the distance between Earth and the Sun varies more throughout the year. At one point in its orbit, Earth is closer to the Sun. 6 months later, it's farther away. This affects how much sunlight Earth receives at different times. Second, Earth's axis tilts, like a spinning top that's leaning to one side. Currently, Earth tilts at about 23.5 degrees, but this tilt changes, varying between about 22 degrees and 24.5 degrees. This cycle takes roughly 41,000 years. The amount of tilt determines how extreme the seasons are. More tilt means hotter summers and colder winters. Less tilt means milder seasons, cooler summers and warmer winters. And here's the key. If summers are cool enough that winter snow doesn't completely melt, that snow accumulates, year after year, layer upon layer, until you have ice sheets. Third, Earth wobbles on its axis like a spinning top that's starting to slow down. This wobble is called precession, and it changes which hemisphere is tilted toward the Sun during different parts of Earth's orbit. This cycle takes about 26,000 years. Right now, the northern hemisphere experiences winter when Earth is closest to the Sun, which makes northern winters milder than they would be otherwise. But during other parts of the precession cycle, this reverses, and northern winters become much colder. Now here's where it gets really interesting. These three cycles, eccentricity, obliquity, and precession, all work together, combining and interfering with each other like multiple rhythms in a complex piece of music. Sometimes all three cycles align to make northern hemisphere summers as cool as possible. When that happens, snow starts accumulating in northern latitudes. It piles up year after year. Eventually you have massive ice sheets forming across Canada, Scandinavia, and northern Asia. But ice sheets don't just sit there passively, they change the planet. Fresh white ice reflects sunlight back into space instead of absorbing it. This cools the planet further. Colder temperatures allow ice sheets to grow even larger. It's a feedback loop, where initial cooling triggers effects that cause even more cooling. Meanwhile, with so much water locked up in ice on land, sea levels drop. Coastlines extend outward, land bridges appear between continents. The whole map of Earth transforms. Then, eventually, the cosmic dance shifts. The cycles move into a configuration that favors warming. Northern hemisphere summers get stronger. Ice begins to melt. Water flows back into the oceans. Sea levels rise. Forests replace grasslands. And the giants, the mammoths, the woolly rhinos, the saber-toothed cats, must adapt or perish. This is the 100,000-year rhythm. This is the pulse that has beaten through millions of years of Earth's history. Slow growth of ice over tens of thousands of years, then relatively rapid melting, then the slow build-up begins again. What's fascinating is that the 100,000-year eccentricity cycle is actually the weakest of the three Milankovitch cycles in terms of how much it changes the amount of sunlight Earth receives. The other two cycles should matter more, yet when scientists study climate records from ice cores and ocean sediments, the 100,000-year pattern dominates. This is called the 100,000-year problem, and scientists are still working to fully explain it. The leading idea is that there are feedback mechanisms that amplify the eccentricity cycle. Perhaps it takes a very long time to build up massive ice sheets, but they can collapse much more quickly. This system spends most of its time slowly accumulating ice, then rapidly releases it when conditions shift to warming. This asymmetry could explain why the 100,000-year pattern shows up so strongly. Think about this as you drift towards sleep. Our entire human story has unfolded within these cycles. Our ancestors evolved during Ice Age conditions. We learned to make fire, create tools, paint art, tell stories, all while Earth oscillated between frozen and warm states. The Ice Age shaped us just as surely as it shaped the mammoths and the landscapes. And the rhythm continues even now, a cosmic heartbeat that began long before humans existed and will continue long after we're gone. But during the cold phases of this rhythm, Earth became home to some of the most remarkable ecosystems ever to exist. Let's travel now to the peak of the last glaciation and explore this frozen kingdom in detail. Chapter 4: A Frozen Kingdom at Peak. Glaciation. 20,000 years ago, at the peak of the last glaciation, Earth wore a completely different face than the one we know today. If you could float above the planet and look down, the first thing you'd notice is the ice. Vast sheets of white covering enormous portions of the continents. All of Canada lies beneath ice, not just a layer of ice, but ice kilometers thick in places. Imagine stacking 3 of the world's tallest buildings on top of each other, and you begin to approach the thickness of ice covering some regions. This ice sheet, called the Laurentide, was so massive that its weight actually pressed down on the Earth's crust, deforming solid rock. Europe too wore a white blanket. The Fennoscandian ice sheet covered Scandinavia, the Baltic region, parts of Britain and northern Russia. Together, these ice sheets contained roughly 15 million cubic kilometers of ice, almost incomprehensibly vast. With so much water frozen on land, sea levels dropped by about 120 meters. To visualize this, imagine a 40-story building. The ocean surface dropped that far. This changed coastlines dramatically. Britain connected to France by dry land. You could walk between them. Indonesia, now thousands of separate islands, formed one continuous landmass connected to Asia. Between Alaska and Siberia, a vast plain called Beringia stretched for thousands of kilometers. This was the route humans would eventually use to reach the Americas. But it wasn't just about ice and lower seas. The climate was fundamentally different. With colder oceans and so much water locked in ice, there was less moisture in the atmosphere. This made the Ice Age world not just colder, but drier. Deserts expanded, rainforests shrank to small refuges. The Amazon basin, that steaming jungle we know today, was much drier, probably a mix of grassland and scattered trees. The ice sheets acted like massive refrigerators, creating zones of intensely cold air that would flow off the ice in powerful winds. These winds picked up dust and silt from exposed ground and carried it hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. In some parts of China, dust deposits over 100 meters thick accumulated during glacial periods, more than a 30-story building made entirely of wind-blown dust. Dust storms must have been spectacular and terrifying, darkening the sky, coating everything in fine powder. But here's what's remarkable. This harsh landscape supported abundant life. The Mammoth Steppe stretched from Europe across Siberia and into North America, the most extensive grassland ecosystem in Earth's history. It was cold and dry, yes, but it was productive. A unique mix of grasses, sedges, herbs, and low shrubs provided food for huge populations of large herbivores. Herds of horses, bison, reindeer, and mammoths grazed together. Scientists studying ancient DNA from frozen sediments have found evidence of dozens of different plant and animal species living together, creating ecosystems more diverse in some ways than the tundra that exists in those regions today. In South America, the landscape was different, but equally remarkable. Open grasslands called pampas stretched across huge areas. Giant ground sloths, car-sized glyptodons, horse-like creatures, and massive birds roamed these plains. South America had been isolated from North America for millions of years, so it evolved its own unique megafauna. Australia, isolated by ocean even during low sea levels, had its own giants. Enormous wombat-like creatures called diprotodons. Massive kangaroos standing over 2 meters tall, a marsupial lion, and immense flightless birds ruled the Australian continent. Each region had its own cast of characters, but they shared common themes: large body size, adaptations for cold or seasonal climates, herbivores feeding on grasslands or mixed vegetation, predators hunting the herbivores. These weren't struggling remnant populations barely surviving. They were thriving ecosystems, as rich and complex as African savannas today. And woven through these ecosystems were humans, small populations of hunter-gatherers, tough and clever, surviving through ingenuity and cooperation. In Europe, Neanderthals had been living through Ice Age cycles for hundreds of thousands of years. They were cold-adapted, with stocky builds and large nasal passages to warm frigid air before it reached their lungs. They made sophisticated tools, used fire effectively, hunted dangerous game, and even created art and buried their dead. Modern humans, spreading from Africa, brought new technologies and cultural innovations. They made fine needles for sewing fitted clothing. They created elaborate artwork in caves. They developed more complex weapons and broader trade networks. The world was cold, harsh, and demanding. But it was also full of life, beauty, and possibility. As you imagine this frozen kingdom, notice how life didn't surrender to the ice. Instead, it adapted, evolved, and flourished. Mammoths developed thick wool and special blood chemistry that worked in extreme cold. Humans learned to make warm clothing and substantial shelters. Plants evolved to handle cold temperatures and grazing pressure. Life is persistent. Life is creative. Life finds a way. This frozen world would last for tens of thousands of years, following the slow rhythm of Earth's cosmic dance. Generations of mammoths were born, lived, and died. Thousands of human generations told stories around campfires, painted animals on cave walls, passed down knowledge to their children. And then, about 19,000 years ago, something began to shift. The cosmic cycles were moving into a configuration that favored warming. Northern Hemisphere summers grew stronger. Ice began to melt. The transition had begun. But before we follow that story forward into warming, loss and transformation, let's spend more time in the frozen kingdom. Let's get to know some of its inhabitants intimately. Because the more we understand these creatures, the more we appreciate what was lost when they vanished. Chapter 5. The Secret Lives of Ice Age Titans. Let's meet some individuals. Not just species, but specific creatures with their own stories. Picture a woolly mammoth matriarch we'll call grandmother. She's 60 years old, ancient by mammoth standards. Her fur, once deep brown, has greyed with age. Her tusks are massive, curved and worn from decades of use. Grandmother leads a family group of 12 mammoths. Her daughters, their offspring, one great-granddaughter. She's walked these grasslands for 6 decades. She knows where to find water during the driest summers, which routes to take to avoid deep snow, where predators tend to hunt. During a particularly harsh winter 15 years ago, when snow buried the grasslands for months, Grandmother remembered a valley 20 kilometers away where wind usually kept slopes clear of snow. She led the family there, and they survived when other herds starved. That knowledge, held in her memory, saved their lives. Now, as late afternoon light slants across the plain, Grandmother leads the family toward a river crossing she knows. The younger mammoths trumpet to each other, the calves playing, pushing each other with their small trunks. It's a peaceful scene, families travelling together in a cold but beautiful landscape. Not far away, a woolly rhinoceros bull stands alone, as adult male rhinos often do. Let's call him Iron Horn for the massive horn on his snout. That horn is over 1 meter long, worn smooth at the tip from constant use pushing through snow. Ironhorn is methodical in his feeding. He uses his horn to sweep aside snow, revealing the vegetation underneath. His lips are flexible and precise, selecting the plants he prefers. Despite his enormous size and formidable horn, he's generally peaceful and less threatened. But during mating season, male rhinos compete fiercely. Ironhorn bears scars from past battles, a long mark across his flank from a rival's horn, a notch in his ear from a fight years ago. He won that battle and mated with several females. Some of his offspring now graze these same grasslands. In South America, imagine a female giant ground sloth we'll call Deep Digger. She weighs nearly 4 tons and stands as tall as an elephant when upright. Currently she's doing something remarkable, excavating a burrow. Her powerful forearms, tipped with enormous claws, rake through earth. Dirt flies backward as she works. She's been digging for days, creating a tunnel that will eventually stretch 40 meters into a hillside. Why such effort? She's preparing a den where she'll give birth to a single calf. The burrow will protect her baby from temperature extremes and predators. Inside this underground chamber, her calf will be safe while learning to eat solid food and grow strong enough to follow the family group. Deep Digger's burrow, like thousands of others dug by ground sloths across South America, will remain long after she's gone. Thousands of years in the future, human scientists will find these tunnels and marvel at the claw marks on the walls, trying to understand what massive creature could have excavated such passages. Now watch as a saber-toothed cat stalks through tall grass. We'll call her Shadowfang. She's a female Smilodon, and she's hunting to feed her 2 cubs hidden in a rocky den several kilometers away. Shadowfang has spotted a young bison separated from its herd. She drops lower, moving with incredible patience. Despite her powerful build, she's more muscular than any modern big cat. She moves with liquid grace. The hunt requires perfect timing. Unlike modern lions or tigers that kill with suffocating throat bites or spine-breaking attacks, Shadowfang will use her saber teeth as surgical instruments. She needs to get close, use her powerful forearms to wrestle the bison down, then deliver one precise bite to the throat. She springs. The bison tries to run, but Shadowfang's powerful forearms grip it, claws digging in. They tumble together. In seconds, it's over. A clean bite. Major blood vessels severed. The bison's struggles weaken and cease. Shadowfang will feed here, then carry meat back to her cubs. She's good mother, and her hunting skills will determine whether her cubs survive to adulthood. These individual stories, grandmother leading her family, Ironhorn surviving through strength and experience, Deep Digger preparing for her calf, Shadowfang hunting to feed her young. These are the same stories that play out in nature everywhere. Parents caring for offspring, animals using intelligence and memory to survive, predators and prey locked in the ancient dance of life. Ice Age animals weren't monsters or curiosities. They were living beings with individual personalities, learned behaviors, family bonds and daily struggles. A mammoth mother loved her calf just as fiercely as a modern elephant does. A saber-toothed cat protected her cubs with the same ferocity as a lion. The fact that we'll never see these creatures again makes their stories bittersweet. But their lives mattered. They were successful. For hundreds of thousands of years they thrived. And we can still meet them through fossils, through frozen specimens preserved in permafrost, through artwork created by humans who lived alongside them. Scientists have found woolly mammoths with their stomach contents intact, the last meals of individuals who died suddenly, perhaps falling through ice. By studying these remains, we know exactly what plants they ate. We can identify grasses, herbs, flowers, even the trees they browsed. We've found baby mammoths, perfectly preserved, with milk still in their stomachs. We've found adults with wear patterns on their teeth showing they favoured one side while chewing. We've found old individuals with arthritis, healed fractures, evidence they were cared for by their groups even when injured. Each discovery adds detail to the picture, bringing these lost creatures back to life in our imagination. Think of them now as you relax. Picture grandmother leading her family across the frozen grassland, her breath steaming in cold air, her family safe around her. Picture Deep Digger, massive and gentle, digging her burrow with patient determination. Picture Iron Horn clearing snow with powerful sweeps of his horn, surviving another winter. These creatures lived full lives in a world very different from ours. They faced challenges we can barely imagine, and they succeeded for hundreds of thousands of years. Their story is part of Earth's story, part of our story, and understanding them helps us understand ourselves, how we evolved, how we survived, how we became who we are today. Chapter 6: Architects of the Frozen Earth. The Ice Age giants weren't just living in their environment, they were actively shaping it. This is one of the most important concepts in ecology, and it's something that scientists are still working to fully understand. Large animals, especially very large animals, are what we call ecosystem engineers. Their activities, their feeding, their movement, their very existence, create and maintain the habitats they live in. Let's explore this idea with mammoths, because they're a perfect example. A single adult mammoth might eat 150 kilograms of vegetation every day. That's an enormous amount. Now multiply that by thousands or tens of thousands of individuals in a region. Mammoths were consuming staggering quantities of plant material, but they weren't just eating grass. Mammoths also knocked down trees. Using their tusks, head, and sheer size, they would push over saplings and small trees, then strip off the bark and eat the tender branches. This behaviour had a huge effect on the landscape. By constantly knocking down young trees, mammoths prevented forests from taking over grasslands. They maintained open, park-like landscapes with scattered trees and extensive grass. Exactly the habitat that mammoths and many other Ice Age animals preferred. It's a feedback loop. Mammoths maintain grasslands by destroying trees. Grasslands support large mammoth populations. Large mammoth populations keep destroying trees. When mammoths went extinct, this feedback loop broke. Trees that would have been knocked down as saplings instead grew to maturity. Over time, forests expanded into areas that had been grassland for thousands of years. The landscape transformed. Some scientists think this vegetation change actually affected climate. Grasslands and forests have different albedos. That's the amount of sunlight they reflect versus absorb. Dark forests absorb more heat than lighter grasslands, especially when there's snow on the ground. So the shift from mammoth steppe to forest might have contributed to further warming after the Ice Age. There's even a hypothesis about mammoths and methane. Large herbivores produce significant amounts of methane from their digestive systems. It's a byproduct of breaking down plant cellulose. With millions of large herbivores across the northern hemisphere, they were likely producing considerable methane emissions. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas. When megafauna went extinct, those emissions stopped. Some scientists think this might have contributed to cooling during the Younger Dryas period, though this remains controversial and debated. The point is, these animals weren't just passive inhabitants of their world. They were active participants in creating the conditions they lived in. Woolly rhinos clearing snow with their horns exposed vegetation that smaller animals could then access. Bison grazing stimulated grass growth, keeping grasslands productive. Ground sloths created underground habitat that other animals would later use. Even predators shaped ecosystems in important ways. When saber-toothed cats and other large carnivores killed prey, they rarely consumed the entire carcass. What they left behind fed scavengers, dire wolves, giant short-faced bears, birds, smaller mammals. A single mammoth or bison carcass could support dozens of scavengers. Those scavengers, in turn, distributed nutrients across the landscape through their own droppings. Nutrients from a carcass in one location would end up distributed across many kilometers, fertilizing plants, supporting insect populations, feeding everything from small mammals to birds. It's all connected, a web of relationships where every species affects others, where large animals have outsized impacts, where the removal of even one species can trigger cascading changes throughout the system. We're seeing this today in places where large animals have been removed. When wolves were eliminated from Yellowstone National Park, elk populations exploded. They overgrazed vegetation, affecting everything from beavers to songbirds. When wolves were reintroduced, the entire ecosystem began shifting back toward a more balanced state. This is called a trophic cascade, effects cascading down from top predators through multiple levels of the food chain. Ice Age ecosystems would have experienced similar cascades, but on even larger scales with even more species involved. Imagine what happened when saber-toothed cats went extinct. Prey species they had hunted, horses, bison, young mammoths, suddenly faced less predation pressure. Their populations might have initially increased, but more herbivores mean more grazing pressure on plants, which affects plant communities, which affects other herbivores, which affects other predators. The removal of one piece affects the entire puzzle. This is why the extinction of Ice Age megafauna was such a catastrophe. It wasn't just that we lost these impressive animals, it's that their loss transformed entire ecosystems, triggering changes that cascaded through food webs and altered the fundamental character of landscapes. The Mammoth Steppe ecosystem, that vast productive grassland that supported such diverse and abundant wildlife, doesn't exist anymore. Not just because the climate changed, but because the engineers that maintained it are gone. Some scientists are now trying to recreate Ice Age ecosystems in a project called Pleistocene Park in Siberia. They're introducing large herbivores like horses, bison, and musk oxen to see if these animals can maintain grasslands in areas that are currently shrubby tundra. Early results suggest it might work. Areas with high densities of large herbivores show more grassland vegetation, less shrub cover, even changes in soil temperature. The animals are creating conditions similar to the Mammoth Steppe. Could we someday bring back something resembling Ice Age ecosystems? It's an intriguing question, though obviously we can't resurrect extinct species, at least not yet, though some scientists are working on using DNA from frozen mammoths to possibly create something mammoth-like through genetic engineering. But even if we could, should we? These questions don't have easy answers. For now, we can appreciate that the Ice Age world was a functioning, complex system where giant animals played crucial roles. They weren't just impressive to look at, they were necessary parts of their ecosystems, maintaining the conditions that allowed those ecosystems to thrive. Their loss was like removing foundation stones from a building. The structure didn't immediately collapse, but it was fundamentally weakened, forced to reorganize into something different. As you drift towards sleep, imagine those mammoths moving across their grassland. each one not just an individual, but a force shaping the very landscape it walks through. Imagine the interconnected web of life, predator and prey, plant and animal, each affecting all the others in ways we're still discovering. The Ice Age world was a masterpiece of ecological complexity, painted across frozen landscapes by the brushstrokes of evolution, working over hundreds of thousands of years. Chapter 7: Humans in a World of Giants. Now we come to our own ancestors, humans living in the Ice Age world, surviving alongside and among the giants. This is where the story becomes personal, because these people, they were us. Anatomically, genetically, mentally, they were modern humans with brains just as capable as ours. If you could bring an Ice Age child into the present and raise them in a modern family, they would grow up no different from any other child. They could learn to read, do mathematics, play music, use computers, anything. The difference wasn't capability, it was experience and culture. Ice Age humans possessed knowledge and skills that most of us today couldn't match. They could read tracks, identifying not just which animal passed by, but how long ago, whether it was healthy or injured, where it was heading. They could start fires in wet conditions with damp materials. They could predict weather patterns by observing clouds, wind, and animal behavior. They knew every plant in their environment, which were edible, which could heal injuries, which could be made into cordage or tools or dyes. They could craft weapons that were works of art as well as functional tools. They could survive in conditions that would kill most modern humans within days. In Europe, Neanderthals had been living through Ice Age cycles for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived. They deserve enormous respect. Imagine a Neanderthal family on a winter evening. Father, mother, 3 children huddled around a fire in the mouth of a cave. The fire is carefully maintained. Fire means survival. Father is working on a spear, using a careful technique to haft a stone point to a wooden shaft with birch bark tar adhesive he prepared yesterday through a complex heating process. This isn't simple work. It requires planning, precise temperature control, understanding of materials. Mother is processing an animal hide, scraping off remaining fat and flesh with the stone tool she made herself. This hide will become clothing for the youngest child, who is growing fast and needs something warmer for the coming deep winter. The older children are carving pieces of wood, practicing skills they've watched their parents demonstrate. The eldest is trying to make a simple point, concentration intense on a young face lit by firelight. This is a family much like families in any era. Parents working, teaching, protecting, children learning, playing, growing. Bonds of love and care that transcend time. Neanderthals cared for their injured and elderly. We've found skeletons with healed fractures that would have been debilitating, broken legs, severe injuries that would have prevented hunting or gathering for months. These individuals survived because their groups cared for them, shared food, protected them while they healed. We've found a Neanderthal skeleton with severe arthritis and advanced tooth loss. This person probably couldn't hunt and couldn't even chew tough food easily, yet they lived to old age. Someone was caring for them, perhaps pre-chewing food, certainly making sure they were fed and protected. This is humanity, not a feature unique to modern humans, but something we share with our Neanderthal cousins. Modern humans brought their own innovations when they arrived in Europe around 45,000 years ago. They made fine bone needles, enabling sewn-fitted clothing that provided better insulation than wrapped hides. They created more diverse toolkits with specialized implements for different tasks. They made art prolifically, cave paintings, carved figurines, decorated tools. Both groups, Neanderthals and modern humans, coexisted for thousands of years, and we now know they didn't just coexist, they interbred. Most people today of European or Asian ancestry carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. That means your ancestors and mine probably knew Neanderthals personally. They probably talked with them, traded with them, loved them. Neanderthal genes for immune function, for skin and hair traits, for response to cold, these survive in us today. They're not extinct, they're part of us. Life in the Ice Age required incredible knowledge and cooperation. Hunting megafauna meant coordinating groups of people, planning tactics, making weapons, then executing a dangerous plan where mistakes could easily result in death. There's evidence of drive hunting, herding animals toward cliffs or constructed traps. This requires scouts to locate herds, drivers to spook animals in the right direction, people positioned at the trap to finish off injured animals, butchers to process the carcasses. Every person has a role. Communication and coordination are essential. Some sites show evidence of mass kills, dozens or hundreds of bison or horses driven off cliffs in single events. This provided enormous amounts of food, but also required enormous amounts of work to process before the meat spoiled. The entire community would have been involved for days, cutting meat, drying it for storage, processing hides, extracting bone marrow, rendering fat. Humans also developed fishing technology, bone hooks, harpoons, probably nets, though these rarely preserve. This opened up aquatic resources, providing reliable food from rivers, lakes, and coasts. Coastal living was probably more common than we realize, but most Ice Age coastlines are now underwater due to sea level rise. The richest, most productive areas, river mouths, estuaries, shallow bays, these are all flooded now, hiding evidence of human occupation. Occasionally we find hints. Underwater archaeology has discovered stone tools and camping sites on what are now submerged continental shelves. These were prime locations during the Ice Age. Abundant seafood, migratory routes for animals, relatively mild climates due to proximity to ocean. Ice Age humans also created art of stunning sophistication. The paintings at Lascaux and Chauvet caves in France aren't crude or primitive. They show accurate observation, skillful technique, understanding of movement and anatomy. An artist painted a panel of horses with their heads turned at different angles, manes flowing, bodies dynamic. Another painted a cave lion stalking, its body language perfectly captured, weight forward, intensity in its posture. These artists knew their subjects intimately. They watched animals closely, understood how they moved, how muscles shaped their bodies, how light and shadow defined their forms. Why create such art deep in caves where few would see it? We don't know with certainty. Perhaps it was ritual, connecting with animal spirits before hunts. Perhaps it was teaching, showing young people what animals looked like, how they behaved. Perhaps it was simply expression, the human need to create beauty, to leave marks saying, "I was here, I saw these things, I felt moved to capture them." That impulse to create art, to tell stories, to pass on knowledge, that's deeply human, older than agriculture, older than cities, stretching back into the depths of the Ice Age and beyond. Your ancestors, dozens of generations removed, sat around fires on frozen plains and told stories. They painted animals on stone. They carved figurines from mammoth ivory. They made music with bone flutes. They buried their dead with care and ceremony. They looked up at the same stars we see. Though without light pollution, those stars would have been spectacularly bright. They wondered about the world, where they came from, where they went when they died. They loved their children and mourned their losses. They were human in every way that matters, and they survived. Through ice and cold, through the dangers of hunting enormous beasts, through harsh conditions we can barely imagine. They survived and eventually thrived. Their knowledge, passed down through generations, became the foundation for everything that came after. Agriculture, civilization, technology, all of human achievement built on the base of Ice Age survival skills and cooperation. We are their descendants. Their genes flow in our veins. Their intelligence is our intelligence. Their perseverance lives in us. As you rest now, feel that connection across time. You come from survivors, from people who faced incredible challenges and overcame them. That strength, that cleverness, that determination, it's your inheritance. Chapter 8. The Great Warming and Mysterious Disappearance. Around 19,000 years ago, the cosmic cycles began shifting toward a configuration that favoured warming. Northern Hemisphere summers grew stronger. The ice began its long retreat. But this warming wasn't smooth or steady. The climate swung dramatically, sometimes changing faster than we can easily comprehend. By 14,700 years ago, Earth had been warming for several thousand years. Ice sheets were shrinking. Sea levels were rising. The world seemed to be transitioning smoothly from glacial to interglacial conditions. Then something remarkable happened. A catastrophic event called the Younger Dryas. The name comes from a flower, Dryas octopetala, that grows in cold conditions. When scientists studying ancient sediments found layers with abundant Dryas pollen appearing suddenly in a period that had been warming, they knew something dramatic had occurred. The temperature had crashed. In Greenland, temperatures dropped by about 15 degrees Celsius in just a few decades, possibly as little as 10 to 20 years. The North Atlantic region plunged back into near glacial conditions that lasted over 1,000 years. What could cause such a dramatic reversal? The leading explanation involves a catastrophic flood of biblical proportions. As the great ice sheets melted, water pooled behind them in enormous glacial lakes. The largest, Lake Agassiz, was bigger than all modern Great Lakes combined. This lake was held back by a dam of ice. When that dam failed, and geological evidence shows it did, multiple times, unimaginable quantities of fresh water flooded into the North Atlantic in months to years. This enormous freshwater pulse disrupted ocean circulation patterns. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, essentially a conveyor belt that transports warm water from the tropics northward, slowed or stopped. When this heat transport shut down, the Northern Hemisphere lost a major source of warmth. Temperatures plummeted, ice began expanding again. For over 1,000 years, Earth teetered on the edge between glacial and interglacial states, and then, about 11,700 years ago, the Younger Dryas ended just as abruptly as it began. Temperatures spiked upward. In some regions, temperatures rose 10 degrees Celsius in just a decade or two. The final transition to our current interglacial period, the Holocene, was complete. For the megafauna, this was catastrophic. They had evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to thrive in cold, open environments. But now those environments were disappearing, replaced by forests and different vegetation. The mammoth steppe, that vast productive grassland, was transforming. Forests spread across regions that had been open plains. The climate became warmer and wetter. Many Ice Age species found their habitats fragmenting, shrinking, changing faster than they could adapt. And the extinctions came swiftly. In North America, between 13,000 and 11,000 years ago, most megafauna vanished. Mammoths, mastodons, horses, camels, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, giant short-faced bears, gone. Nearly 80% of a large mammal species disappeared within just a few thousand years. Europe saw similar losses. Woolly mammoths vanished from most of their range. Woolly rhinos went extinct. Cave lions disappeared. Giant deer died out. South America lost its unique megafauna. All the giant ground sloth species, glyptodons, native horses and camels, massive rodent relatives, wiped out. What caused this wave of extinction? This question has sparked fierce debate for decades. Two main explanations have competed: climate change versus human hunting. The climate change hypothesis argues that rapid warming and habitat transformation was more than these animals could handle. Species adapted to cold grasslands couldn't adjust quickly enough when those grasslands became forests. Populations fragmented into isolated pockets. Small isolated populations face multiple threats: inbreeding, disease, random environmental fluctuations. An extinction vortex forms where declining populations face cascading problems that make recovery impossible. There's good evidence supporting climate's role. The extinctions coincide with extremely rapid climate change. Species adapted to cold climates were hit hardest. The timing matches the transition from glacial to interglacial conditions. But here's the puzzle. Megafauna had survived previous deglaciations. The 100,000-year cycle means there were multiple transitions from cold to warm over the past few million years. If megafauna survived those, why not this one? That's where the human hunting hypothesis comes in. By the end of the Ice Age, modern humans had spread across most of the world. Human populations were larger than ever before, and critically, humans had developed increasingly effective hunting technologies and strategies. The atlatl, a spear thrower that dramatically increased range and power. Sophisticated group hunting strategies. Eventually, in some regions, the bow and arrow. Humans had become the most effective predators on the planet. And when humans arrived in regions where megafauna had no previous exposure to human hunters, like the Americas or Australia, the local animals showed no fear. They were naive prey, easy targets for experienced hunters. Mathematical models show that even low-intensity hunting, killing just a few % of a population annually, can drive large, slow-breeding animals extinct over centuries to millennia. A female mammoth might reproduce only every 5 years. Mammoths didn't reach sexual maturity until their teens. If you kill even a small number of reproductive age females each year, the population can't replace losses. And we know humans hunted megafauna. The evidence is undeniable. Butchered bones, spear points embedded in mammoth ribs, kill sites with multiple animals. The timing in North America is particularly suspicious. The extinctions coincide almost exactly with the spread of Clovis culture, a group with particularly effective hunting technology. Within a few thousand years of Clovis people expanding across the continent, the megafauna were gone. But it's probably not either or. Most scientists now think it was both factors working together. Climate change stressed megafauna populations by fragmenting and transforming habitats. Human hunting prevented already struggling populations from recovering. Together, these two factors created a perfect storm that most megafauna couldn't survive. There might have been cascade effects too. The loss of megafauna themselves altered ecosystems, without mammoths and other large herbivores maintaining grasslands. Forests expanded, making habitat even less suitable for any remaining Ice Age species. It was a tragedy in slow motion, unfolding over thousands of years. populations dwindling, ranges contracting, the giants of the Ice Age fading away until only a few remnant populations remained. The last mammoth survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic until about 4,000 years ago, after the pyramids were built during the Bronze Age. Then they too disappeared, ending an evolutionary line stretching back millions of years. The world we know today, forests where grasslands once stretched, elephants only in Africa and Asia, where once their relatives lived across continents, no large predators with saber teeth. This is the world that emerged from those extinctions. A world diminished in some ways, a world that lost its giants, but also a world where humans would go on to develop agriculture, build civilizations, create art and music and literature, eventually reach for the stars. The Ice Age ended, the rhythm shifted to its warm phase, and humanity entered a new chapter. Chapter 9. Echoes of the Ice Age in our modern world. 11,700 years ago, the Holocene began, our current interglacial period. The world that emerged from the ice was transformed. Climate became warmer and more stable than it had been during the wild fluctuations of deglaciation. Forests expanded dramatically across regions that had been tundra and grassland. Sea levels continued rising as the last great ice sheets melted. Coastlines reached approximately their modern positions. For humans, this was both challenge and opportunity. The megafauna they had hunted were gone or disappearing. Large herds of mammoth and bison no longer provided reliable food sources. People had to adapt their subsistence strategies. In some regions, people turned heavily to fishing and gathering shellfish. Coastal sites from this period show enormous shell middens, mountains of discarded shells representing thousands of meals. In other regions, people focused on smaller game like deer and rabbits, supplemented with gathered plant foods, nuts, seeds, roots, berries. But in a few special regions, something revolutionary happened. People began deliberately cultivating plants, selecting seeds from the best individuals, planting them intentionally, tending them, harvesting them. This was the beginning of agriculture, and it changed everything about human society. The first clear evidence appears in the Middle East around 11 to 10,000 years ago. Wheat and barley cultivation, sheep and goat domestication. In China, rice and millet agriculture began around 9,000 years ago. In Mesoamerica, maize was domesticated around the same time. Independently in multiple regions within just a few thousand years of each other, humans invented farming. Why then? The question has fascinated researchers for generations. One answer might be the climate stability of the Holocene. Agriculture requires planning for the future, planting seeds and waiting months for harvest. This only makes sense if you can reasonably predict that conditions will remain suitable for plant growth. During the wild climate fluctuations of the late Ice Age, that wasn't a safe bet. But during the Holocene, climate became stable enough to make agriculture viable. Another factor might have been population growth. As conditions improved after the Ice Age, human populations probably grew. Eventually, hunting and gathering couldn't support higher population densities. Agriculture produces more calories per unit of land, supporting larger populations. Necessity drove innovation. Whatever triggered it, agriculture spread rapidly, bringing enormous changes. Permanent settlements replaced nomadic lifestyles. You need to stay near your crops. These settlements grew into villages, then towns, eventually cities. Agriculture also required new forms of social organization. Who controls land? How is surplus stored and distributed? How are disputes resolved? New hierarchies emerged: chiefs, priests, eventually kings. specialized occupations developed: potters, weavers, metal workers, traders. Not everyone needed to produce food, so people could specialize in other skills. Writing was invented in multiple regions to keep records of trade and tribute. Mathematics developed for measuring fields and counting harvests. Astronomy arose partly from the need to track seasons for planting. Within just a few thousand years of the Ice Age ending, the first civilizations emerged: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China. Cities with thousands of inhabitants, monumental architecture, complex social hierarchies, art, music, literature, all built on the foundation of agriculture, which became possible partly because of the stable Holocene climate. Think about that extraordinary transformation. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived as mobile hunter-gatherers in small bands, following game, gathering wild plants. Then, within just a few thousand years after the Ice Age ended, some human societies developed farming, built cities, created writing, and invented civilization. It's one of the most rapid and dramatic transformations in human history. But agriculture came with costs. Early farmers typically had less diverse diets than hunter-gatherers, eating mostly carbohydrates from a few crops. Skeletons show more nutritional stress, shorter stature, more cavities, signs of dietary deficiencies. Disease became a much bigger problem in permanent settlements with high population densities. Waste accumulation, contaminated water, and close contact with domestic animals created perfect conditions for infectious diseases. Many diseases that afflict humans today originated in domestic animals after we began living closely with livestock. Yet agriculture's overwhelming advantage was that it could support far larger populations. More people meant more workers, more soldiers, more inventors. When agricultural societies encountered hunter-gatherer societies, farmers usually won through sheer numbers. Over millennia, agriculture spread across most regions where climate allowed it. Most humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming, and the world continued changing. The Sahara, which had been relatively green and wet in the early Holocene, dried out around 5,000 years ago, becoming the desert we know today. This forced populations to migrate, many moving to the Nile Valley. Some historians think this contributed to the development of ancient Egyptian civilization, people concentrating along a reliable water source, creating the population density and organization that enabled monumental building projects. Climate variations during the Holocene, though milder than Ice Age fluctuations, have repeatedly affected human societies. Droughts have toppled civilizations. Warm periods have enabled expansion. Cold snaps have caused famines. We're still shaped by climate, even if we like to think we've transcended it. And we're still, in a sense, living in the Ice Age. The Quaternary Ice Age that began 2.6 million years ago technically hasn't ended. We're just in an interglacial period. Eventually, if natural patterns continue, ice sheets will return. Or at least, that's what would happen naturally. But now there's a new factor: human activity affecting climate on a global scale, potentially overriding the natural 100,000-year rhythm entirely. We've increased atmospheric carbon dioxide by over 50% in just a couple centuries. The ice core records show nothing like this in the past 800,000 years. Some scientists think we've already delayed or cancelled the next glaciation. The extra warming might prevent ice sheets from forming, even when orbital cycles favour glacial conditions. We've become a force capable of affecting the climate cycle that shaped human evolution. That's both remarkable and sobering. The rhythm that operated for millions of years might now be overridden by one species that emerged from that very rhythm. What comes next is up to us. Chapter 10. The Rhythm Continues. As you drift towards sleep, let's reflect on this magnificent journey we've taken together. We've travelled back 20,000 years to a frozen world where ice sheets kilometres thick covered continents, where coastlines lay far beyond their present positions, where vast grasslands stretched across regions that are now forests. We met the giants who ruled that world, woolly mammoths with their graceful tusks and thick fur, woolly rhinos with their snowplow horns, giant ground sloths digging their massive burrows, saber-toothed cats stalking prey with surgical precision. We learned about the cosmic dance that creates ice ages, Earth's wobble and tilt, its stretching and shrinking orbit, all combining to create a rhythm that has beaten for millions of years. Every 100,000 years, ice sheets advance and retreat, transforming the planet, shaping the evolution of life. We walked among these vanished ecosystems, understanding how the giants weren't just impressive animals but essential ecosystem engineers, maintaining the very habitats they lived in. Mammoths knocking down trees to preserve grasslands, rhinos clearing snow for smaller animals, predators distributing nutrients across landscapes through their kills and scavenging. We met our ancestors, both Neanderthals, those remarkably capable cold-adapted humans who lived through ice age cycles for hundreds of thousands of years, and modern humans spreading across the world, developing art and technology and culture while surviving in one of the harshest periods in Earth's history. We witnessed the Great Warming and the mysterious disappearance of the giants, the complex interaction of rapid climate change and human hunting that ended the Ice Age world, transforming ecosystems and landscapes forever, and we followed humanity into a new chapter, the Holocene with its stable climate enabling agriculture, settlements, civilization, everything that has brought us to where we are today. Throughout this journey, one theme is woven through everything: rhythm, the 100,000-year rhythm of ice ages, the seasonal rhythms of migration and reproduction, the daily rhythms of hunting and gathering, of predator and prey, of sunrise and sunset. All of nature moves in rhythms: heartbeats, breath, day and night, seasons, the years, the centuries, the millennia. We are part of these rhythms, embedded in cycles that stretch far beyond human lifetimes, connecting us to deep time, to our ancestors, to the very planet we inhabit. As you sleep tonight, you're part of that rhythm. Your breath, slow and steady, your heartbeat, reliable and calm, your mind drifting through dreams, processing the day, preparing for tomorrow. And Earth continues its ancient dance through space, tilting and wobbling, following its slightly elliptical path around the sun. The cosmic rhythm that shaped the Ice Age world continues, even now, even as you sleep. The Ice Age taught us that life is resilient, creative, and adaptable. Life finds a way, even in the harshest conditions. Mammoths evolved special blood to carry oxygen in extreme cold. Humans learned to make fire and clothing and shelter. Ground sloths dug burrows the size of tunnels. Every species developed its own solutions to the challenge of survival. That same creativity, that same resilience, that same determination lives in you. You carry the genetic legacy of survivors, people who faced ice ages and climate changes and enormous predators, and somehow not just survived but thrived. Their strength is your strength. Their intelligence is your intelligence. Their perseverance is your perseverance. When you face challenges in your life, remember that you come from a line of survivors stretching back through the Ice Age, through hundreds of thousands of years, through unimaginable hardships. You have that within you. The Ice Age is over in a sense. The giants are gone, the frozen grasslands have given way to forests and tundra. The world has been transformed, but the patterns continue, the rhythms persist. Life adapts and changes and continues, and we are part of that great continuing story, connected to everything that came before, connected to everything that will come after. So rest now. Let these thoughts drift away like clouds across a wide sky. Picture the frozen plains one last time, mammoths moving peacefully across grasslands, their breath steaming in cold air, living their lives in a world so different from ours yet somehow familiar. Families travelling together, mothers caring for young, the sun setting over an ancient landscape. The rhythm continues, steady and eternal. The pulse that has beaten for millions of years keeps beating still, and you are part of it, connected to deep time, to ancient mysteries, to the magnificent story of life on Earth. Sleep well, knowing that you're part of something vast and beautiful, part of the great continuing pattern that connects all living things across time and space. The 100,000-year rhythm breathes on. The giants may have vanished, but their story remains, written in stone and bone and ice, waiting to be discovered, remembered, honoured, and now their story is part of your story too. Rest now. Dream of ancient landscapes. Feel the connection across time. The rhythm continues, the dance goes on, life persists and adapts and finds new forms, new beauty, new ways to thrive, and you are part of that magnificent ongoing story. Sleep peacefully, traveller through time, sleep well.